So my Allusion project is over the story of David and Goliath. The story of David and Goliath is pretty well known. It's the Israelites versus the Philistines, and Goliath, who is on the Philistine side, is a champion warrior, and David, who is just a shepherd and a young boy, he's actually the youngest of his family, he represents the Israelite side. So the Israelites and the Philistines were kind of at a standoff. Every single day they'd be yelling insults and stuff at each other. Now, Goliath said that he would settle this by fighting one person from the Israelite side, but no one was brave enough to confront him. One day, David came to drop off some food to his brothers who were in the army, and he saw Goliath and how he was insulting all of them. So David felt that it was his need to go fight him. So he went to the king and asked him to let him fight Goliath. At first, the king was hesitant, just because David was a young boy and he was on the smaller side. However, the king finally agreed once he heard David's stories about how, by the grace of God, he had been saved by fighting off lions and bears and other wildlife while he was protecting his sheep. So in the end, the king said yes, and David and Goliath were set to fight. On the day that David went to go fight Goliath, he went without any fancy weaponry or without even any armor on. All he had was his slingshot, 5 stones that he had picked up, and his shepherd's stick. At first, Goliath felt a bit insulted that they would send someone so small to fight against him. So right away, Goliath started insulting David and saying other things about David. But David let none of that get to him, as he knew that he had God by his side, and everything that Goliath was saying was false. Before Goliath could even swing his sword at David, David pulled out his slingshot and struck Goliath in the head with a rock. Right away, Goliath fell to the ground unconscious, and David used Goliath's own sword to chop off Goliath's head. So in the end, because of God's grace, David ended up beating Goliath. So how you can identify this illusion in just pieces of literature in general. So the first one is kind of that small versus big. You have that big, huge guy who everyone thinks is going to be the obvious winner, but then you have that small underdog who comes up and he ends up defying the odds, and everyone's so awestruck when he wins in the end, which is, it's basically the plot of any Disney movie you ever see. But another one is that size doesn't matter. David was a smaller guy, but he still ended up being Goliath. And then other word usage, such as giant, which would be referring to Goliath, since he was around 9-foot guy and just a really muscular guy in general. The usage of slingshots when it comes to choice of weaponry. And also just the names David and Goliath. If you've ever listened to the song Never Say Never by Justin Bieber or Hallelujah, they both mention the names David and Goliath as they are subtly referring to this story. So other themes of this, other illusions. Other themes of illusions, So one is that when you believe, you can achieve anything. Just as David believed in himself and believed that God had his back, and so he was able to defeat Goliath. Other ones, overcoming your fears. Or then the next two, never underestimate anyone, and don't let your pride or ego get the best of you. Those two kind of go together. Goliath let his ego as being a champion warrior get to him, and he let his guard down. And he was easily defeated by David. And that was because he let his pride get in the way. And then the last two also kind of go together, which is God has your back, and having a faith in a bigger principle that is more than yourself. And those both can be seen through David's faith in God. So David and Goliath, allusions in Facing the Giant, which is a sports movie about football. There's lots of instances in sports movies where you have the underdog team that comes out and ends up winning state. So there were many examples that I could have chosen from, but I thought Facing the Giants was the most convincing about how it is referring to a David and Goliath illusion. So just to give you some background about the movie, it's the Shiloh Eagles football team. They're not that good. The team doesn't work together. A lot of times they just don't show up to practice. They don't try that hard in school. They're the underdogs. They've had 6 consecutive seasons of just losing. And because of all of this, the school and parents of the players, they all want to replace the coach. And the coach is also going through his own hard times as well. But the coach found that having his faith in God and praying to God was helping him through those tough times. So he brought that same principle and those same ideas to his team. He introduced having that faith in God, and it ended up unifying them, and they worked together really well. And during the same season, a new kid named David moved to the high school. He used to be a soccer player, but at this new high school, they didn't have a soccer team, so he joined the football team as a kicker. At first, he was a relief kicker, and he couldn't even kick straight. But as the season went on, the starter kicker ended up getting hurt, and David ended up taking his spot. They ended up making it all the way to state, and in the end, the winning play was actually made by David. And so the team that they defeated were the Giants, which is kind of just like the basic allusion to David beat the Giants in this movie. And David was also just a smaller guy in general, and he had so many doubts about his abilities, about whether he could be a good kicker or not. But all of that went away when he understood how God had his back and he used his faith in God. So yeah, there's my works cited, and thank you for watching.